It was a cold Saturday morning in Seattle. The kind of morning when the smell of fresh coffee feels like a warm hug against the chill outside. Inside a cozy corner coffee shop, a little girl sat quietly at a table by the window, her hands moving gently in the air as she signed to herself. She was deaf. She couldn't hear the laughter or the chatter that filled the room, but she could feel the world watching her, and that morning, a few teenage boys decided to mock her, cruelly mimicking her signs and laughing. What happened next would change everyone's life in that coffee shop, especially the single dad who stepped forward to defend her, not knowing who she really was, or who her father happened to be. Hey everyone, welcome back to Here we share real-life stories that warm the heart and remind us of the good still left in this world. If you believe kindness can truly change lives, make sure to end sharing your thoughts, because your words might inspire someone else to be kind today. Now, let's begin this powerful story. Mark was a single dad in his late 30s. His life hadn't been easy. His wife, Jenna, passed away 3 years ago, leaving him to raise their 6-year-old son, Ethan, on his own. Since then, mornings were a blur of school lunches, missing socks, and quick coffee runs before heading to work as a mechanic. That Saturday, Mark decided to treat Ethan to their little tradition: hot chocolate for the boy, a large black coffee for himself, and a muffin they'd share. It was their quiet time together, their weekend ritual to just breathe and talk about superheroes, school, and life. When they entered the coffee shop that morning, Mark noticed a girl sitting alone near the window. She was maybe 10 or 11, with light brown hair pulled into 2 neat braids. She had a small notepad in front of her, and every few moments she'd sign to herself as if practicing a conversation. She looked peaceful, until a group of 3 teenage boys walked in. At first, they ordered their drinks and laughed among themselves. But then, one of them, tall, wearing a red hoodie, pointed at the girl and began imitating her hand movements. His friends burst out laughing. The girl froze, her eyes lowering to the table. Mark felt his stomach twist. He looked around. No one moved. People noticed, but pretended not to. A few lowered their heads, suddenly too busy with their phones. Mark's heart pounded. He looked at Ethan, who was staring at the girl, confused. "Dad," Ethan whispered, "why are they making fun of her?" Mark didn't think twice. He stood up, his voice steady but firm. "Hey. That's enough." The laughter stopped. The boy in the red hoodie turned. "Who asked you, old man?" Mark walked closer. "You should apologize to her. Right now." The boy rolled his eyes. "Relax, dude. We were just kidding." "Yeah?" Mark replied. "How would you feel if someone mocked the way you talk?" The coffee shop went silent. Even the barista froze mid-pour. The girl stared at Mark, her hands trembling slightly. Mark softened his tone and looked at her. "You okay?" She nodded, slowly signing something, but Mark didn't understand sign language. Still, he smiled and placed a hand over his heart. "You're safe now, okay?" The teenagers mumbled under their breath and left the shop, embarrassed. The barista muttered a quiet thank you, and a few customers clapped softly. Mark returned to his table, trying to calm down, as Ethan beamed at him proudly. "Dad, you were like a superhero." Ethan said, grinning. Mark chuckled. "Nah, buddy. Just doing what's right." A few minutes later, the girl walked over. She held her notepad, hesitated, and then slid it across Mark's table. Written on the page were the words. Mark smiled warmly. "You don't have to thank me, sweetheart. You didn't deserve that." She quickly scribbled again. Mark's chest tightened. "That's not okay. You're brave, you know that?" She smiled a small, shy smile and signed something again before writing another message. Mark laughed softly. "Your dad sounds like a wise man." The girl giggled silently and nodded. She wrote one more note before heading back to her table. Of this place? But before he could ask more, she was already sipping her cocoa by the window again. A few minutes later, a tall man in a gray coat entered the shop. He was in his early 40s, sharp-looking, confident. The staff immediately straightened up. He glanced around and then spotted the girl. She jumped up and ran to him, signing excitedly. Mark watched as the man's expression changed, first confusion, then a smile, then something deeper. He walked straight toward Mark's table. "Excuse me," the man said, his voice calm but warm. "Are you the one who stood up for my daughter just now?" Mark nodded modestly. Yeah, those kids were bothering her. I couldn't just sit there. The man extended his hand. I'm Daniel. And that's my daughter, Lily. Thank you. Not many people would have done what you did. Mark shook his hand. She's a strong kid. I just wish people were kinder. Daniel nodded thoughtfully. You know, I've owned this coffee shop chain for 12 years. I've seen thousands of customers come and go. But people like you? Rare. Mark smiled awkwardly. I'm just a mechanic trying to raise my boy right. Daniel looked down at Ethan. Well, you're doing a great job, sir. He paused, then said something unexpected. You mind if I sit with you for a minute? The three of them sat together, and for the next half hour, Mark learned more about Daniel and Lily. Lily had been deaf since birth. Daniel and his wife had worked tirelessly to make her life full and joyful. She loved art, dancing, and coming to her dad's coffee shops to sketch people. But even with all that love, the world wasn't always kind. Mark shared his story too, about losing Jenna, about how he tried to be both mom and dad to Ethan. About how some days he felt like he was failing, and how hard it was to stay positive. Daniel listened quietly, then said, You know, Mark, you may think you're just doing small things, defending a kid, raising your boy, but that's what changes the world. One small act of courage at a time. Mark smiled, feeling something he hadn't felt in a while. Hope. When it was time to leave, Daniel handed Mark a business card. Listen, he said, we're looking to open a new branch soon. I'd love to hire someone like you, someone with integrity. You don't find that on a resume. Mark blinked in surprise. Me? But I'm not. Daniel raised a hand. You're exactly the kind of person I want representing this brand. Think about it, okay? Mark shook his hand again, humbled. Thank you, sir. Daniel smiled. No, thank you for showing my daughter what real kindness looks like. The following week, Mark visited Daniel's office. True to his word, Daniel offered him a management position at the new branch, a better salary, flexible hours, and benefits that meant he could finally spend more time with Ethan. When Mark asked why Daniel trusted him so much, Daniel said, Because you didn't do it for attention. You did it because it was right. People like you are what this world needs more of. That night, Mark tucked Ethan into bed. His son whispered, Dad, you're my hero. Mark smiled, tears filling his eyes. Nah, buddy. Heroes are the people who choose kindness even when nobody's watching. Months later, Mark managed the new coffee shop with pride. Every morning, Lily and Daniel would stop by, and Lily would always greet him with a smile and a new sign she taught Ethan. The place became known for its warmth, not just in coffee, but in spirit, and people noticed. The story of the single dad who defended a deaf girl spread quietly but powerfully through town. Customers came not just for coffee, but for kindness, the kind that ripples outward, changing hearts one act at a time, because that's the thing about kindness, you never know who's watching. You never know how far one small moment can go. So next time you see someone being treated unfairly, or you have the chance to do something good, take it. You never know whose life you might touch, or how it might change yours in return.